Welcome back to Raised by Giants discussion. I'm your host, Ryder Lee. Welcome any moderators and channel members out there. And if you're watching on YouTube or X, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, or if you're listening to the replay, welcome to the show. All of my social media links are in the description: Facebook, Instagram, X. Great ways to stay connected. Links to watch my documentaries, JFKX and The Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime and Tubi, are also in the description. Still in the process of making my next documentary, Psychic Agent. Keep on the lookout for that. Also, don't forget to check out Raised by Giants on Ground Zero Radio Plus with Clyde Lewis Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m., Saturday, 5 p.m. on the Ground Zero Radio Plus network. Link is in the description. With that down, we have with us today, he's the author of the book Deja Vu: Has Everything Already Been? Has Our History Been Rewritten? And Are We the First Advanced Civilization? Aleksander Czeszkiewicz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Hello, everyone.
So I want to start off with asking you, instead of going through all the how did you get to do this, blah, 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 I'm going to start off with asking, why is our history important, and why is it important for humanity to know our true history?
I think it's very important, and plenty of different philosophers, thought leaders, and plenty of so-called famous people were showing us how important knowledge of our history really is. I can tell you very well, here in Poland, we were under partitions for 123 years. We were Russified, so Russians wanted to eradicate our culture and language, Germanize on the other hand. And we here in Poland know very well how important our history is, because if you can control history of particular group of people, you can actually control them very well. And I think it's the basic method of human control by the elites, that they want to cut us off from the roots, cut us off from history, also cut, let's say, young people from the old ones. It's the, I would say, basic tactic for controlling people, because if we do not have any kind of knowledge, any kind of memory, it is easy for other people to tell us how everything is working in the reality. For instance, when it comes to paradigms that are ideologies that are governing our modern world, we see, for instance, materialism, rationalism ruling the modern world when it comes to science. If we do not know history, it's very, very easy to control the narrative. And if you control narrative, in this case, as an example, when it comes to materialism, rationalism, that there is nothing beyond ourselves being just biological machines, it's very easy to control people, to control their destination, where we are heading. And I think it's the the basic of all control.
If you control the past, then you control the future. I mean, I find the topic
Orwell,
of
yeah.
if I find this topic of ancient history and archaeology to be fascinating, but it's really easy to get lost in the sauce, right? And it seems like nothing ever really gets solved, because the history is never going to be rewritten. So in many ways, it seems like a lost cause. Not only that you're competing with big history and textbooks that's been used for decades, that has really been, ingrained into people's minds. I mean, civilization gets pushed back what seems like thousands of years almost every single year, and no one really cares, right? It seems like no one cares, at least. I mean, we could literally find 1 million-year-old human skeleton tomorrow, Alexander, and that it turns out that it has DNA that doesn't match any known DNA, and that it was from Mars, and then that they got on the spaceship and then escaped Mars due to a giant catastrophe, and people would be like, cool. And everything just keeps chucking along, right? We still got to wake up, go to work tomorrow, and pay those bills, baby.
Yeah. The bills are actually the the bigger basis of control. So this philosophic, the knowledge of history is a secondary, or like the root one, but the basic survival, keeping people in this survival state that you cannot go, or you can just only go a little bit outside of your survival zone, is of course the biggest control and the biggest threat when it comes to humans. And I agree to a large extent with you that, oh, people, seem to don't care, seem to do that. And I think that's why it's very important to even get any kind of knowledge about our past, any kind of knowledge about even psychology, philosophy, stuff like that, because when you start digging deeper and deeper, you start realizing how important it is. And the school system isn't very kind for students, for young people to research more, to learn more about these very important topics. I'm very young, and I remember most of my research, most of my interest and passion going for such topics was completely outside of school. So when I was at school, I was always bored. I always wanted to ask more questions. I always wanted to know more about this. And I knew by just looking at what we are being taught at the curriculum, I think it's the basics of how our mind works that we see that this is important and this is not important. And what we are being taught at school is like 80-90% of this non-important stuff. And when you want as a kid in the school system, oh, this is very important, if we research that more, we could find something groundbreaking, we can rewrite history, or we can find new technologies, free energy and stuff like that. And I think plenty of young people would be very curious about these topics, and that could, propel them to research more and to learn more. But unfortunately, whenever you want, it of course depends on the teacher also, but in most cases, if you want to dig more, oh, oh, this is impossible to get free energy. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Just stick to the curriculum and stuff like that.
What do you think about the idea that we are that there's like 2,000 years missing from the calendar, that we are not really in the year of 2026, that it's like we're in the year of 26? Is there any
Mhm.
truth to that in your research, that a large chunk of history has just been gone and rewritten?
I'm not a total proponent of such theory that there is such a huge gap in the missing years. I think that there could be a few years, maybe a few decades of missing history when it comes to the known stuff, but I think that the more of the lost history is just taking the roots of civilization, of humanity back and back. And I don't think that in our current timeline we have such a huge gaps as so many people are, showing us that. And it was mostly this basis that either there are different theories, maybe a few hundred years of this lost past during the medieval ages is probably the most famous one of these theories, maybe a few thousand years. Most of these theories are based on the fact that when we are learning this history, let's say from the medieval times, that these proponents tell us that there was no history, that this history was fabricated, we see plenty of different, some people would say even archetypes, plenty of different motifs repeated on and on again, that shows that maybe it was fabricated, maybe it was made up, but actually my book is Deja Vu has everything already been, and I take this cyclicality into considerations even when it comes to calculations. And I think that it is not the evidence that it was made up, but it may be the evidence that there is something going on a bigger level, as some maybe new age people would say, karma, reincarnation, stuff like that, that the history tends to repeat itself, maybe because of unresolved conflicts, maybe because of the same energies, maybe something going on with astrology and stuff like that. I'm more into this kind of scenario, and I don't think that we have hundreds or even thousands of years from the history we know that was completely erased. Maybe some events, yes, but not like full years being erased and things being put into that. I think that more lost history is when it comes to the most ancient, most remote eras. This is the place where we find the biggest vault of lost knowledge.
Now, when it comes to giant cataclysms and these events that could essentially just wipe out civilization, I mean, that's what I think a lot of these world wars are, that They kind of start a world war, and then the world war comes in and destroys a lot of history. It destroys a lot of cultures. It destroys a lot of different things. It's kind of like a soft reset. But when it comes to like giant cataclysms coming, like a huge natural disaster or something like that, maybe a lot of this stuff is really hard to discover because there isn't any evidence left of it, right? Let's say that humanity just up and left right now just disappeared. How long until everything just withers away, until you can't find a trace of any civilization was ever here in the first place? I mean, you can look at some places like Hiroshima and you can see that it doesn't take that long. And even if there was something left behind after thousands of years, who's to say a future human race would even be able to understand what we were doing in our technology? I mean, do you think that someone in 200 years from now is going to know what a floppy disk is, Alexander? Okay. There's
Yeah,
people right
that's
now on this planet that don't know what a floppy disk is. And that was less than 20 years ago. So why are we pretending that we know all of these civilizations' tools and the processes of these ancient civilizations and what they were using? It makes no sense.
That's a great question, a great thread of thought because I actually started my book. My book is about mostly lost history, cyclical time, but I started the first chapter with this idea: what would happen if nowadays, if today, let's say there would be a cataclysm, comet impact, asteroid impact, any kind of cataclysm, or maybe just we as humans completely vanish from our Earth. And I was doing calculations and looking for different kinds of scenarios, how many years it would take for our modern civilization, advanced civilization, to decompose completely. And actually, in just a few thousand years, most of the evidence wouldn't survive. And if we're talking about, let's say, spans of tens or hundreds of thousands of years, even some very, very strong materials or stuff like the garbage that we put on the, in the cosmos, in the, space between us and other planets, everything could completely vanish. So yes, I started with these questions. Most of the plastics were being threatened that, oh, we garbage our entire planet with plastics, that plastics decompose in spans of a few hundred years, maybe up to 1,000 years. Metals decompose in millimeters per year. The same with plenty of other materials. So I would say, even let's say conservatively, because of course in 200, 500, 8,000 years, most of our civilization would be vanished. But when it comes to, like, let's say all the evidence, microscopic evidence and stuff like that, I think that 100,000 years and there would be completely no trace of a modern civilization. Maybe only a few out of places artifacts as we find them all the time. Some things that are locked in coal or in other kinds of geological layers, that can happen in very specific conditions that are just a minuscule of all the conditions. Of course, it's like less than 1% of all the conditions that happen everywhere on our planet. And if we are looking, even again, I want to start conservatively, and then you can see how much truth there is in all of the things that are called conspiracy theories. Of course, not being negative about them, but how it is called on the internet and everywhere by the so-called debunkers. But when you see even that, and you see that anatomically modern humans, even scientifically, appeared about between 500,000 years ago, maybe 300,000 years ago, you see that there may have been multiple advanced civilizations just as ours today that we have almost no evidence for. We, as you've said about cataclysm, we may have even more evidence for the cataclysms because they are natural stuff and they impact huge areas of land, not like just one stuff, and they impact entire climates and entire, places, entire continents. So we even may have more evidence for natural disasters than for civilizations themselves. And I even had this, just being curious, if let's say in ancient Sumer, let's say 5,000 years ago, they used plastics, nowadays we'd almost have no evidence that they used that because it would completely decompose. So maybe what we have are these natural materials they use, like stones, like clay tablets and stuff like that, but maybe they use something much more advanced that just haven't survived till our times.
It's interesting because I think whenever modern people look back at like ancient history, they look at them like just like stone tools and stuff like that. And that's always really surprised me because if we can't right now, if there's people right now that don't know what some of the technology that we've made in the past 20 years is, how are we supposed to understand what they were using back 1,000 to 2,000 years ago? I mean, it could be completely different. And when people talk about advanced ancient civilizations, they're running on a timeline that they think that we went on when it could be something completely different. Advanced technologically doesn't have to mean computers and cell phones. Okay, that's just the timeline that we went on. That doesn't mean that that's the timeline that they went on. What I'm getting at is that technology can mean something completely different than the way that we perceive it. It could be a different kind of technology.
Yes, it may also, as you said, mean something different. It may also be based on something different. Nowadays, everything run on silicon chips, transistors, and stuff like that. But it may be a completely different technology, maybe just as some psychic readings say about using crystals in the Atlantean times or something like that. We just headed towards this technology, towards electricity and all of that, but the technology may be completely different, or as you've said, it may mean something different. For instance, in the most ancient Hindu epics like the famous Mahabharata, there are mentions of psychic technology that, for instance, a person was completely blind physically, and but he could see by remote viewing of some sorts things that were happening miles away from him, and he was using that, and people were much more psychic. Even when it comes to these Hindu epics, it's the most famous version of the cyclical history, cyclical time, the yugas. It's meant that in the Kali Yuga, everything is based on matter, including technology, including human lives, everything is like that. But in other yugas, it's different. It's more spiritual. For instance, in the Golden Age, Krita Satya Yuga, and people don't need the material life. They are so enlightened, so psychic, maybe just telepathic, and they do not need to use words, use technology, because everything is, let's say, manifesting at instant or something like that. So yeah, this may be a different technology.
Yeah, that's always stuck with me. And I think that instead of fighting and arguing over how old all of these ancient and megalithic sites are, like the pyramids of Giza, it's 2,000 years old. No, it's 5,000 years old. I think that we need to be figuring out what this site was used for. Okay. They weren't tombs. No bodies were ever found in them. So you can rule that out. We have to start thinking logical. What was this stuff used for? And what benefit did it serve these ancient people? And can we use it today? Right? Can we fire up that pyramid? Okay. Can we get that whole mechanism running again? That's what we should be doing. But instead, it's about arguing over how old it is. Arguing about how old it is effectively covering up what it was even used for in the first place.
Yeah, I will start with the dating. Just a quick note, I've been doing an extensive research into dating, different kind of dating methods, and I explain them in my book very well. But even the basic stuff like the nuclear weapons and their detonations, they all change the dating. Everything is different. What we call the dating, because it's not only the famous carbon dating that it's so irrelevant in alternative history and stuff like that. No, we can date on basics on the basis of plenty of different natural elements, but what we know is just estimation of the time of they decay, because they're radioactive elements, but these things can change, at all times. There are even, of course, theories that the laws of physics can change to some extent. So imagine and the rates of decay of different materials, if they can be just influenced by solar rays or by nuclear detonation. Most of the datings are, nothing when it comes to dating the past. But when it comes to pyramids and their kind of technology and their usage, I mentioned plenty of different theories and compared them in my book about the pyramid technology. But my personal one, and it's funny because I see the train of thought of casual Egyptologists and mainstream why they are thinking it was for the dead bodies of the pharaohs and stuff like that, and I see a grain of truth that they're saying, but not in the full picture. I think that the pyramids were used as some kind, again, of spiritual technology, something like, and you see it in plenty of different traditions, occult, esoteric, secret societies traditions, about initiation as being some kind of out-of-body experience, near-death experience, ascension. There are different names for that, but I think that the Great Pyramid was used for that because we know, and it is to some extent a fact, at least from the sources we know, maybe they do not represent the official ancient Egypt, of course, and their beliefs, but the Orion, and we know that the pyramids of Giza are aligned towards Orion, not only when it comes to the three pyramids being located like that, but also to the shafts looking at the Orion belt constellations. We know that Orion was for them some kind of gateway, portal, when it comes to part of the soul, because we think, okay, maybe we have a soul spirit nowadays, but the ancient Egyptian belief was much more advanced than that. There was Ka, Ba, so different parts of metaphysical, spiritual us inside of us. So they mentioned that part of the soul went to the Orion belt, and you can see similar beliefs. For instance, in Native Americans, they also believe that part of the spirit is going on after death, for instance, to the Orion, and that's how it escapes, let's say, the material world, the universe, the matrix, or something like that. And I think that the pyramid was not for the, and it was nowadays more common like that, but I think 5 years ago or something, it was a very obscure theory, but nowadays you see even on Joe Rogan people, alternative researchers, claiming similar thing, that the pyramid was not for the dead body, like the pharaoh mummified, but for a live body. So people undergoing some kind of ritual, some kind of near-death experience using this technology, because we know very well, for instance, just because the pyramid is made of these huge stones and they include quartz in them, we know that physically pyramid is accumulating some kind of electromagnetic energy, even on the physical level. And we know it's very big, it's aligned to all the stuff like the true north, like the center of the landmass of our planet and things like that. I think that it amplified the spiritual experience, just as people undergo with DMT, LSD, and different kinds of drugs. And I think that the pyramid was a technology, what we would call nowadays, as I've said, near-death experience, out-of-body experience, ascension, for something going beyond the body, and it amplified that. Just as plenty of other, we know, temples all around the world, megalithic temples, can induce altered states of consciousness. So I think it was used for that.
Have you been to Egypt? I've never been to Egypt.
No, I haven't, unfortunately, no, not yet.
Well, apparently there's these giant sarcophagi that are like weigh tons and tons, and no one really
Yeah.
knows what they were used for. And then they also have them underneath the pyramid of Giza as well. And there's also a tiny little lake under there of water, where two sarcophagi are submerged in water. Now they say whenever they found this that there wasn't anything in them. Who knows if they're
Yeah.
telling the truth? But it's just very odd and very strange. And then you also have like these these shafts that go through the entire pyramid that are like what, I don't know, 12 by 12. They're very small that a human body cannot
Yeah.
fit through. That's where they took that robot that went through there and drilled a hole into the wall, and then it was a big huge thing. But like, what were those shafts used for? I mean, you can't fit a human body through there. What were they used for? So it doesn't really, I mean, were they doing laundry way back then? You know, the laundry chute, you know what I mean? Throwing laundry down through there. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think
It's
it
very
may
odd.
be a connection with this, what I've said about part of the soul going through the Orion belt, because allegedly, but it all depends on the timeline we are going on during different times. These shafts were aligned to the Orion belt, so maybe it was for, let's say, out of body experiencer soul going out of through these shafts, I think. But yeah, you've said plenty of things. There are plenty of different sarcophagi. I call them very often coffins found not only in Giza but in plenty of other locations in ancient Egypt. And as you've said, in most of them we found nothing, and in the ones that we found some kind of skeletons or some kind of things, they were later additions. I think in the third Menkaure pyramid we found a body that was initially, 200 years ago or 150 years ago thought to be the Menkaure, the famous pharaoh of this third pyramid, but later it turned out to be much later pharaoh that wanted to claim that he built the pyramid, and we dated the body that he was of the much later time. So what you've said is true. We also have, because it's not only pyramids and sarcophagi, you mentioned of the underground, we have, for instance, the Osiris shaft, which is on the Giza plateau, not directly underneath the pyramid but nearby the pyramid. And this Osiris shaft goes again into solid rock, straight a few tens of meters down. Then there is the first passage with these coffins, with huge coffins that we do not know what they were made for. So the first level, and then another shaft going straight, down in solid rock, and then underneath, as you've said, there is this lake or something like that. There are different kinds of structures, as you've said, on the Giza plateau itself, and there are so many questions about them.
If there's an underneath chamber of underneath the Great Pyramid, then that probably means that there's underneath chambers of every single pyramid. Like, why would you just put it in one and not put it in the others? So, what do you think of the new information that's come out of the scans of the pyramids?
Yeah, I think that for sure there is something underneath the pyramids, and I've heard both sides of the voices. That ones were saying that, oh, this technology is very good for penetrating through the ground, and the others said, no, this technology is not for this application and it wouldn't provide us with any information about that. It's all just noise and things like that. I also am very skeptical about the AI interpretation of all of this data, and I think that there is something. You've said that there are plenty of underground stuff. The Osiris shaft that I've mentioned is also on the Giza plateau, but just, on the side of the pyramid. I also think that because on these images, which were later, as I've said, AI interpreted, which for me is a little bit of the red flag, I think what we've seen with this miles long of spiral stuff going underneath the pyramid, I think that this may be something maybe not directly physical, like some kind of spiral staircase or something, but maybe it may be connected with what I've said about the energy of the pyramids. There are plenty of different, even physical, and even physicists agree that the Great Pyramid of Giza, because it's so huge, accumulates energy. So I think it may be just, some kind of maybe energy coming out of the earth and towards the pyramid, and pyramid being accumulating this energy. I don't think I'm skeptical to this that it's 100% as these people said it looked like. I'm skeptical to that, but for sure there is something underneath the pyramids, and I think that even as I've said, if we don't find anything like this huge, I think it may be the representation of some kind of energy going on, because all over the world we have traditions, ley lines, the feng shui in China of some kind of earth energies, and that may be further connected with. I'm also speculating about another thing with this spiritual side of the pyramids, that because the Great Pyramid of Giza is a model of the northern hemisphere of the earth, so half of the earth, people speculate that it can have some kind of resonance with our entire planet. So maybe also the Great Pyramid of Giza and other pyramids were for some kind of inner earth energy harvesting, maybe in negative purposes, who knows.
What do you feel like? Do you think there's any credence to the, because one of the original theories was is that the pyramid complex was some sort of free energy source, that it's an endless supply of fuel, and that would be life changing, right? We should be getting on that. If that's true, let's fire that pyramid up, baby. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's some kind of Stargate, sort of like what you're mentioning. And instead of free energy, we get to travel to some other alternate dimension, which I'm also down for. I'm fired up about this, Alexander. Let's go. Let's go. Activate that pyramid Stargate, baby. Let's get weird. Anything goes. Pyramid alternate dimension. Let's get in there. That would really disrupt people's lives. If we opened up a freaking Stargate in the Pyramid of Giza and walk through that bad boy, right?
Or the demons will come to Earth.
We get three-titted warrior ladies with wings and harps, freaking bearded bird head looking asses, flying around and shit, drinking Coors Light, hammered drunk, singing Leonard Skinner. Some crocodile head having asses. It's a party in the pyramid dimension, Alexander.
And that's
That would be
how
like,
these legends of the Nephilim intermingling with humans appeared.
that's right. It was from the Pyramid Stargate.
Yeah, I think that even this idea of free energy, it also may be connected with this kind of spiritual energy, because what nowadays it's even strange what we are in physics. I've been studying a bit of physics. There are different things like work, energy, this thing. I think it's not that universal when it comes to stuff. I think that it may be some kind of free energy, but of a completely different kind that we are thinking of energy sources nowadays. And I completely agree that it could completely change and disrupt the entire world. With the introduction of free energy, I for years was for this, let's find the free energy and stuff like that, was researching it. But I think it may be connected. It may be, as you've said, both, that it's both a Stargate of some kind, that when you are having out of body experience, you can, let's say, astral travel and escape this matrix, this, let's say, material world, and think like that. But also maybe that it's about accumulating energy, or maybe because of this free energy from the pyramid, you're able to have better and easier out of body experience, astral travel. So I think it may be all at once. If you want, I have some things from my book about the energy of the pyramid. And when it comes to the official, as I've said, the only official thing physicists said that it accumulates because of its being big and having quartz crystals. It accumulates energy, physically speaking. But when it comes from non-peer-reviewed stuff, but still experiments, there have been plenty of experiments about the pyramid energy. There have been experiments that inside of it, for instance, fruits, vegetables, yogurts, dairy, all of that have like longer lifespan and isn't getting rotten that easily, or it's not getting rotten at all. There have been experiments of this kind. And even in the medieval times, Arab chroniclers said that when they came first inside of the, I don't remember if it was the Great Pyramid or the Second Khafre Pyramid, they mentioned that they found there plenty of artifacts actually. And in these artifacts, there were, for instance, bendable glass. So for the Arabs, it was, wow, how the glass can be bent. It was like impossible for them. And nowadays, it's common knowledge for us and common stuff that we see transparent things like looking like glass and being bendable. But they also said one key thing that connects with this energy of the pyramid, that inside there were metals that were not rusting at all, that metals were not rusting. And why this is a key idea? Because later, I think in the 1940s, there was a Czechoslovakian man called Karl de Baal, and he found that inside of any kind of pyramidal object with the not dimensions, of course, because there are big dimensions, but with proportions the same as the Great Pyramid of Giza. So in any kind of, let's say, carton or plastic model of the Great Pyramid of Giza, he found and he patented it. So he had a patent for that, for it was even called the great pyramid razor blade sharpener. So sharpener for the razor blades, because he found that inside these kinds of objects, razor blades were always sharp. So they weren't they were always sharp. And I think it may be connected to, as I've said, true experiment, modern one, with this knowledge of non-rusting metals, that it may have some effects. And there were some Russian scientists who were analyzing under the electron microscopes that, yeah, there is something going on with metals inside of things that have similar proportions to the Great Pyramid of Giza, like being this pyramid and having, this different kind of proportions. There have been such experiments, and what is interesting, there are even other patents showing us other kinds of shapes, like the yogurt bowl or something like that, that have similar effects on different material stuff. Like, for instance, bacteria are growing much faster in certain kind of stuff, and there are these, for instance, legends, new age legends from, let's say, in some cases, psychic channelings, that, for instance, the silo shape also has an effect on living things, like some kind of corn or things like that. So there is, I think, some truth to this idea that there are some physical effects inside, putting things inside pyramids or any kind of other different shapes, that we don't understand very well yet, or this knowledge is being suppressed, that certain shapes, for instance, nowadays we are living in flat rectangular rooms, but in plenty of different cultures we lived in the past, of course our ancestors lived in different kinds of shapes of rooms, and maybe it had an effect on their, let's say, health, spirituality, being more psychic, because the energy was flowing better. There are plenty of traditions all over the world nowadays in the new age community. Plenty of people say that, okay, yes, depending on the object, on the shape, it changes the energy, but these traditions are thousands of years old.
It is very interesting how everything is a square and a rectangle that we build.
Satanic, Matrix.
Like,
Yeah.
it seems like we just don't do that anymore. We don't build beautiful buildings, especially in the United States. It's just squares. Even if you get in a plane and you just fly over a bunch of big cities, you see just like a grid. They got us all in a grid. It's just a grid of squares. Even the land that doesn't have anything on it is grids of squares. I'm like,
This is the conspiracy that it's all about the cube, Satan, Matrix, material world, in comparison to the natural, original world of, I don't know, some people say that it was more circles, not squares. But yes, I think that there is something going on, especially with this all of this negativity. I think that it's all about, even subconsciously, even, let's say, we don't believe in spirituality and stuff like that. I think it even subconsciously is getting people more and more depressed. It was very often called here in Europe postmodernism, that it was very dark, this Soviet communistic, probably you've seen some, at least on the internet, this Soviet communistic, this harsh, this cold, this depressing buildings, very often very huge, again, so megalomania. I think it's on purpose to some extent to get people into certain vibration. And again, there have been some experiments on some kind of global consciousness of humanity, and there have been about 40 of them, even some of them peer-reviewed in scientific journals and stuff like that. And they were mostly about that if there is a group of people having, we would call, high vibe or something, being very positive and having intention of being good to others and meditating on the global well-being or local well-being, statistically what these experiments shown, that there was a temporary decrease in, for instance, crime rates, or for instance, in bad weather in comparison to the good weather. So I think there is something going on with our subconscious, maybe spiritual energies, that if we are low vibes, so if we are depressed, and they want probably to get us depressed with that, with music and with all the other programming, wars, media, television, and stuff like that, that it may impact us on a much bigger scale. So if we're on the other hand positive about everything, if we're, creating beautiful things architecturally, but also handsmanship or stuff like that, we may make this global consciousness or the global well-being of humanity be on the rise. There was this David O. Hawkins in spirituality with his famous Hawkins scale of consciousness, and what he said on his analysis, and there were different methods, for instance kinesiology and other, that a person on a higher vibration, it's not only that, let's say I'm 200 vibration and you're 210 and you're only 10 bigger than me. No, if I am on 200 and you are 210, you are like 10 times or 20 times much higher vibration. So it's logarithmic, it's going like that. So you have much higher impact. So it's not that if you have only 10, like 200 and 210 vibration, you're only a little bit higher than me, so you can raise me up, let's say spirituality, and being immediately happier. But it may be that just this 10 may lead to, let's say, 10 or 20 people being able to rise. So it's very powerful, this high vibe. And he said that's why, always good prevails or something like that. But it's of course not always the case, but that there would be never complete evil with, such good people. And he had his scale of consciousness, and he said that different avatars like Jesus, Buddha, or others, they could like eliminate or reduce low vibration of hundreds of thousands of millions of people. So the higher vibration you have, the more people you can uplift.
Well, it really seems like nothing is made to last. There's this planned obsolescence, that the buildings that we make and the buildings that we build in modern times are built to be torn down in 10 years, 10 to 20 years. They tear them down and then they remake them again. They build something exactly in its place. And it seems like that would be a really good way to get rid of history.
Yes.
A really good way to just wipe out a bunch of different stuff that was here before. You make it to where it's not permanent. You make it to where it's not going to last a really long time. I mean, even if you look at, things in Paris, even if you look at things in Moscow, the UK, and areas like it's beautiful architecture that has been there for a really long time, and probably will be there for a really long time in the future. Most of the things that have been made in the United States is not going to be here for a very long time.
Yeah, there's something going on. Some people say that the Americas, not only the United States, it's like the new Atlantis, so New World Order and stuff like that. But yes, I agree with you. As I've said, I'm in Poland. We have been under the communistic regimes until the 1989, 1990. So 30 or something years ago, we were still under communistic regimes. We have plenty of different things. As I've said, we were up until the First World War, so 1914, we were under 123 years of partitions. So we know that's why here in Poland we have like more people to be skeptical of what the television says, what the government says, more like inclined into conspiracy theories, because we firsthand experienced plenty of different kinds of regimes that were trying to tell us what is true and it was not true. So before the First World War, 123 years of partitions by the Germans, by the Russians, by the Austro-Hungarians. As I said, it was called Russification by the Russians, so elimination of Polish culture, Polish language, literature, everything, and getting intelligentsia, so people intelligent, and also people who were rebellious and sending them to Siberia for death. And some people, of course, survived there, but that was another history. And on the German side, the same thing, Germanization, so creating from us a one of the German puppet states and stuff like that. Then a few 20 about years between the First World War up until the Second World War. We have been completely destroyed during the Second World War, and immediately after the Second World War, up until, as I've said, 1990, we have been under the communistic regime. So we know very well how it is to completely change our history. We have, for instance, one of our symbols was a bird with a crown on the hat, so they changed and they took the hat off and stuff like that. Even nowadays, I'm 23 years old, only 23 years old, but during my journey in the educational system, like middle high school, elementary school, high school, I remember at least 2 times of changing a little bit, but changing of the history in the textbooks, because different political party was in power at one time, and at the other there was a different political party. And very important events from our history that were very important were being erased. So even at advanced, let's say, high school or middle high school level, we were not taught these things. And I remember some teachers were even telling us that they erased that just this year and were teaching us it despite the curriculum. But even in the recent times, I've experienced small changes in the history and trying to erase some kind of events. So I imagine what has been done throughout the centuries or throughout the millennia. So we know very well, even from the recorded history and from what was left by the ancients, it was a common practice of changing. For instance, there was, let's say, a temple of this pharaoh, and he was being erased, and we have evidence of erasure of his name, and the other name was being put on this temple. It was called in Latin damnatio memoria, so the damnation of the memory, and completely kind of erasing of a particular person from history. So there are plenty of different examples. As I've said, we here in Poland experienced it firsthand, so we know very well what is going on.
Yeah, the erasure of history. I mean, Rome, the Roman Empire was known for doing that as well, just getting
Yeah.
rid of entire people, like erasing them from history altogether, where people
Yeah.
can't even figure out anything about them. What do you think the deal was with Poland? Do you think Poland had some form of sacred knowledge for it to be destroyed that many times and invaded and taken over and regime change after regime change? Or do you think that it was more of a strategic location during World War One and strategic location during World War Two?
Throughout, let's say, 1,000 years of the official Poland from from the 900, let's say, AD, we had plenty of legends about that Poland was had some kind of spiritual knowledge or some kind of places of power. We have like sacred mountains and stuff like that. We have legends about the Polish people, the ancient Poles, being very strong people and being, just as the Jewish people say, they are the chosen ones. So we here in Poland had similar legends that we were the strong ones, the chosen ones, and stuff like that. It's also very important that at the end of the medieval times, we were very huge, and at some point we even conquered the Moscow, and it was very close for us to be actually the rulers of the Russia just before we were partitioned by Russia and German Empire. So I think that the partitions, so the late, let's say, after, of course, the medieval times, 1700s, it was because of the previous stuff that we were strong, so they wanted. It's the same always, that the strong ones are the danger to the, let's say, fake authorities or people who have dictatorships. So the first thing you are doing whenever any kind of fascism, Nazism, or any kind of other people want to have the most power, they always eliminate the strongest ones. So I think it was partially just because before the Poland was the strong one, so now we need to eliminate and eradicate them completely. But I think there may also be something like going on deeper about spirituality, about particular places in Poland. We have actually, just as you hear about the pyramids or other sites on the entire planet, that there is something going on about the government, for instance, hiding something. We have two places here in Poland that have something mysterious when it comes to the artifacts, to the undergrounds, that people are forbidden completely to research, to go into these underground tunnels that we know very well are there and are only documented that they exist, and only like few chambers were being explored and stuff like that. There is a conspiracy going on in Poland. So I think, what is it? Is it just that it would rewrite our history, that, let's say, Poland is older, or that here in Poland there were some ancient monuments? I think that it may be more than just that. That it may be just as in the case of the pyramids, maybe some kind of energies, maybe some kind of just the Vatican library, the famous one. I think that may be something more than that, but I also do not want to be like in this mythological perspective that we Poles are the best and others are not. No, I think that we shouldn't do that in any kind of scenarios. The same with the famous people in Palestine. I am actually studying history right now, the ancient one of the Middle East, and actually it's crazy story that they just created this narrative that they are the big ones. So I think that in the case of Poland or any other nation, everyone wants to be the strongest ones and have the ancient roots, and especially in God or some kind of strong people. So I think that there is some kind of myth to that.
Well, it's always good to be proud of where you're from and be proud of your culture
Yeah.
and be proud of your people. Were there any ancient mythological stories of, let's say, giants in Poland?
No, that's the thing. I've plenty of times I'm being asked about the giants. We do not have giants, but we have plenty of other similar things like vampires, werewolves, or some kind of, maybe not giants, but very small, like elves or creatures like that, or some kind of monsters on the swamps. But unfortunately, maybe just, but it's not a huge deal in the Polish or Slavic mythology about the giants, unfortunately.
What were the elves? What did they say that the elves were?
Yeah, the elves are more the Germanic stuff, so on the west, but we have plenty of different kinds. There are different names for them, like maybe not elves, this is the western name, but like hochliks or other kind of creatures that are very small. And what I know about, these legends is that they are neither good nor bad, and that they live parallel to us all the time. So it's like the spiritual realm being everywhere. We see, let's say, only this kind of portion of light spectrum, of electromagnetic spectrum, and these beings seem to be all the time everywhere, but mostly in the natural parts, not like in civilization. And they are neither good nor bad, but if you anger them, they will be bad for you. They will create bad karma for you. So bad things will happen to you. Again, they're like on a spiritual level manipulating. If you are good to them, they can give you positive karma. They can spiritually, magically give you something positive later on. But if you're negative or you enrage them, there will be negative things happening in your life. And with plenty of such creatures like these werewolves, vampires, and stuff like that, very often they are mentioned to be of this more spiritual nature, that they are all the time, but only sometimes they, let's say, materialize, or only sometimes we are in such a state of consciousness to see these beings. But in most of the cases, it's like the realm that is parallel to that. So it's like the same, let's say, forest, the same swamp, but just again, I would compare it to a different electromagnetic spectrum.
What do you think deja vu is? Do you think that it's there's many different theories of what people think deja vu, like a combining of a bunch of different timelines, past lives, you've been here before because you remember it because you were here before and you didn't. It's like this converging of timelines. What do you think that it is?
From my own experience, and I had some spiritual experiences in my life, like 100% of the deja vus that I've experienced and I was aware of them were about something that, like a memory that it already happened. And I could trace that because for many years I've been noting down all the dreams I had. And I was crazy about them. I sometimes even were writing down things from like 8 dreams a night. So imagine 8 different dreams in a single night, or 6. Like this was the biggest kind of numbers when it comes to different nights. So I was very into that. And I had plenty of different like spiritual dreams, like things that led me into this, maybe not belief, but knowledge that there is much more to life than just material stuff going on. And from my experience, most of the deja vus were actually things that I've already experienced in my dream. But it was not always, interestingly, 100% like real, because sometimes we have very vivid dreams. Like, let's say, I dream about sitting here talking to you and I can feel, let's say, even my hands and stuff like that. But sometimes we probably experience it the same way, that we have dreams that we know very well what is going on, but visually, or let's say in touch, in smell and stuff like that, are not very vivid. But we know very well about that. And it was the same thing, that maybe sometimes I dreamt of a situation, but it would be that, okay, I only see myself sitting here and talking to you, but I do not see the details and the all the stuff. But in other dreams, I had that, oh, even the smallest thing, or even in some of the dreams, it was more than just, let's say, right now I see this thing, but in my dream I could see, let's say, into the my hand or my microphone, and see the particles and see all the texture on, let's say, microscopic level. So from my own experience, most of the deja vu experiences were that previously I dreamt of it. Maybe not, as I say, 100% realistically, but it was all about memory from my dream. And I believe that maybe it's not only always about the dream, but something that we experience maybe on the astral plane or something like that, or before, let's say, this life. I think that that's why it's a spiritual phenomenon, but connected to, let's say, our materialistic brain memory, that we have this memory, and sometimes we are not aware of it. But as we forget the dreams, we also may not be completely aware during the deja vu that it was this particular dream. But as I've said, during this time that for many years I've been noting down most of the dreams, I found out that 100% of the deja vus are the memories from the dreams.
So it's triggering your mind to remember the dream, but you don't remember that it's a dream. You just remember that you've seen it before.
Yeah.
That's
You
wild.
don't remember that you've dreamt of it, but you for sure. I say dreamt, but maybe it was some kind of out of body experience that we are not aware of. Maybe during our dreams we go somewhere, or maybe it was before this incarnation or another, let's say, pearl lifetime or things like that. But it was just our physical minds do not remember what it was. We hear bell ringing, but we do not know which church it is.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I never thought of that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, if you want something about the dreams, because as I've said, I've experienced it a lot. Actually, parallel to that, because I'm 23 right now, I wrote my book, and it's like 450 pages book, not like some teenage crap, but I wrote it just at 17 in Polish. This is the English version that I created later. But parallel, when I was a teenager and I was, let's say, awakening to the possibility that there is much more when it comes to history, when it comes to conspiracy theories, when I went this rabbit hole, that there is much more to our history. Parallel to that, and I compare it to masculine, like this research into history, conspiracy, and feminine. I had parallel to this feminine path of intuition, dreams, prophetic dreams, spiritual phenomena, synchronicities, and stuff like that. And the dreams are actually, I think that if we are feeling that we have too little of spirituality, of metaphysics, so beyond physics in our life, and we want to experience more, every one of us should start with dreams. Get yourself like a notepad or something, and just any kind of dream you remember, just note it down and try to later, come back to this dream after a week or after a few days to remember it very well, and you will start remembering more and more of the dreams, and you will see that, as I've said, 5 to 8 dreams a night. You remember, let's say, 3, 4 of them, and you will see that 20% of these dreams are beyond materialistic realm, that they are like, you cannot explain them with just, oh, this is my subconscious making things up, it's so, let's say, such a huge computer. You will see that it's beyond rationality, irrational. And then you will see that in this, let's say, 20% or 15% of these let's say, rational dreams, you will find that there are some mystical ones, some like very spiritual ones that can completely change your understanding of reality. It can, completely broaden your perspectives, because you see, oh, it's completely different than in the normal waking state. So I think it's the easiest way, the less dangerous, because nothing can, you will come back probably to your body or something. It's not dangerous like some kind of DMT, ayahuasca, or other kind of drugs or altered states of consciousness. I think dreams are the best way to start. Even, let's say, after a years, maybe some of us are in a place that we are too much in this physical and we want to look for more what is there. So I think it's the best, easiest, and safest way.
Where can people purchase your book?
It's on Amazon's in US, UK. Deja Vu has everything already been. You can just copy paste my name and surname on Amazon, US, UK, Canada, Australia, UK, and plenty of others. Deja Vu has everything already been. Aleksander, Czeszkiewicz. Sorry that I couldn't send you one, but we have here in Poland a complete ban on sending anything, even free book, to the United States due to tariffs. Nothing.
Wow, that's ridiculous. But thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Is there
Thank
any other
you.
place? Do you have a website or anything like that you would like to plug?
Yes, you can find me. Website is Czeszkiewicz Global, but you'll probably not find it. I think the easiest way to find me would be just copy paste my name and surname, Aleksander Czeszkiewicz, and you will find me on plenty of social media: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, also on other podcasts and interviews. So I think it's the easiest way. Copy and paste my name and surname.
Thank you very much, brother. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Very fascinating conversation. For everyone else, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.